All right. So open up the README and start taking a look. I'll go over the folder structure because it's pretty similar to what you'll see on the code challenge, which is why I tried to like separate concerns a little bit more. One thing that I do want to point out is the code challenges that you will take is not going to be you building code from scratch. So you're not expected. I know everything we've done in lecture so far, we've started with a completely empty folder and we create our classes from scratch. We write all of our methods and we have our tests. That's not always going to be the case. Some of the classes might be built out for you already. So it could be the boilerplate in a sense is already built out and you have to take a look at code that's already there, understand what's happening, make sure it works, and then start going through, or I guess like go back and forth, but look at the code first and also integrate the README and the deliverables we're asking for inside of that. So that's something I want to give a heads up. It's also so that you're not spending time setting everything up. The goal is not for you to set up a project from scratch and show us that you know how to do that. The goal for us is to make sure that you understand the concepts. So just to kind of save some time also, some of that work will be done for you. So I already kind of built out a template class that has nothing in it, but just to give you an idea of what it can look like. What I want you all to do first is go through the README, do this on the code challenge too, go through every single line and make sure that you really understand what's happening. You'll notice that the code challenge is kind of split up into two different parts. The basic class methods and properties. It won't be exactly like this. This is just like a template that we created. And then there's going to be the association and aggregation methods. This is where kind of like the meat of the code challenges, I would say. This is where you're actually having one class talk to the other and you have to talk to the join, figure out what the join is. This stuff is all setting up the adder reader, adder writer properly, setting up the add all. So make that distinction. What I point out here is some of these methods are going to be easy to build out and some of these methods are going to be much more difficult to build out. So if you're going step by step by step, line by line by line, there might be a method that you get stuck on for maybe like 15 minutes and you don't end up making progress on the rest of the methods because you're stuck on that one thing. So I really want to encourage you to bounce around, look at all of these methods, get an idea of what the challenge is going to be like, and then get started. So that's kind of a reminder for that. Read through everything, and we'll give you time to do that in the beginning too. Any questions so far? Sweet. So read through the README. If you are having issues accessing this, let me know. I can help you out. And first task that you should always do after kind of, since I'll be going in depth, I won't be going over code yet, is figure out the domain and figure out the relationships for your project. So what I mean by that is if it's a has many through, if it's a many to many relationship, it's very likely on the code challenge, it's also going to be a many to many relationship. Part of the challenge is looking at the variables that are stored in the classes to figure out what the join is. So I'm gonna put like 3 minutes on the clock. I wanna give you some time to just go through this and figure out what the join is. Cool. Any questions on what we're doing?
Just to make sure, this is you said the theater one, right?
Yep. It's the 06-theater review challenge repository. I always forget what I call it.
Perfect.
06 theater review. Yeah. And if I just put it in Google Chrome to save some space so we can see more code here, but you can hit Command-Shift-V and render it on here too.
Yeah, perfect.
Wonderful. All right. I already have like too many tabs open. It's all right. And at any point, if you have any questions at all, this is also your space and chance to ask any and all questions that are still hazy for you. So feel free to speak up. got about a minute left. Oh, whoa. Stop. Okay, that's it. Okay. Let me, cool. Did you all hear the beep or did it just play for me? You heard it?
I can hear it.
All right, cool. So that was about 3 minutes to kind of just figure out what the join is and what the relationship between these are. So first volunteer, whoever has like thoughts, feedback, which class is going to be the join and who wants to volunteer?
Would it be the musical? Is the join class?
So musical is the join. And what's the reasoning for musical being the join? So it'd be like musical.
Yeah, so a theater can have many musicals, but a musical can have one theater. And then a musical can also have multiple performances, but a performance can only belong to one musical.
So performance belongs to,
Like each musical can have multiple performances because it was talking about how performance has like a date, the musical and the theater. The musical can have multiple dates, which is an instance of a performance.
Okay.
So, and then a theater can have different musicals. So a theater can have a musical like A, musical B, musical C on different dates.
Yeah. So a theater can have many musicals. Yeah, and then musical can have many performances. I heard you say like ooh.
So then the join class is the theater.
So the join class is the theater. So typically the join is going to be the model that belongs to both of the classes.
Yeah.
So if a theater has, oh no, why did I do that? If a theater has many musicals, then it would not be able to belong to, if the theater is the join, then it would not be able to have many musicals.
Multiple theaters could have musical.
Yeah, because multiple theaters can have musicals and musical can have many performances. And another thing I want to add on here is another pointer that can kind of guide us to figure out what the join is what kind of variables are going to be stored inside of that. So what is theater going to have inside of the class? Or theater, what are the attributes of theater?
The title and the city.
Yeah, so theater is going to have a title and a city. Title, oh God. Title and a city. And what does musical have?
Musical has the name and setting city.
Name and setting city. Really bad at like spatial stuff. And what does performance have?
Date, musical, and theater.
Performance has a musical and theater.
And a date.
And a date.
Oh, and a date. Yeah, thank you. So in this case, when we define the join class, we say the join belongs to both of the other classes because it's going to store the instance of the objects it belongs to. So performance has a theater, a musical, and a date. Musical has name and setting city. Theater has title and city. So kind of re-evaluating this with the attributes, what is going to be our join?
Performance.
The performance.
Performance. Yeah, I don't want to erase it because it might erase don't erase the, okay, no. I'm not very good at using. No, using the wrong stuff. Oh well, we tried. But the main part is performance is going to be the join because it holds the musical and theater that it's associated with.
Interesting.
That's why this domain is a little setting name. I think I put name and setting city, something like that. And if you think about
Setting
it,
city.
yeah. Did I hear a question on this?
So when trying to figure this out, probably a more beneficial way to do it would be to write out, okay, what is your class supposed to do? What are the methods? What are the variables in each class? And once you have that written out on your different lists like this, the class that has more matching variables of the other classes is the join class.
I would say that's on a good track. I wouldn't exactly say like more matching variables. You'd have to take a look at all three classes and take a look at their attributes, what your subject is. So in this case, what would musical theater and performance even represent? So there's going to be more factors that is going to play in you figuring out the join. But I would say like paying attention to the variables is another good avenue. And what I really liked is when you said that you like in the beginning, you draw it out. So just like I did here, you can have paper and pencil on the code challenge. Take the first 10 minutes to figure out the domain. It's not the end of the world if you start like coding and then halfway through, if you're like, oh crap, performance is actually the join. And you can change it up because you can change the attributes, you can change the add reader. However, when you have 90 minutes on the clock, you want to make sure that the foundation is ready and set. So just draw it out, write out your attributes, something like this, and really be sure that you know what the join is and before you move on to the code. So I kind of flipped it here. However, the domain for this is musical has many performances, and musical has many theaters, and theater, let's see, musical theater has many performances, and performance is the join. So performance belongs to a musical, performance belongs to a theater, and theater has many musicals through performance. So that's where the through relationship comes in.
Can you please go through that again?
Yeah. So in this case, in our many-to-many relationship, when we took a look at our attributes and our models themselves, because performance in this case has the musical theater, musical instance, theater instance, and the date stored inside of it, this is our join. So performance belongs to a musical, performance belongs to a theater, and theater has many musicals through performance, and musical has many theaters through performance, vice versa.
So when you say it's responsible for joining them, what do you mean by that? Like that is the theater is responsible for knowing the musical, but the performance isn't responsible for knowing the theater?
It's flipped. The performance is responsible for knowing the theater because performance has a theater instance stored inside of it.
Okay.
However, the theater is not responsible for storing the performances or the musical because all theater has is a title and a city. In the relationship side of things, the has many is never going to store the relationship stuff. The belongs to class stores it because it's only one instance.
Gotcha.
Like you can have like someone can make a musical and then someone can also create like a different person can create a theater, but there is no relationship unless a performance happens. So that
Exactly.
musical has to occur at that theater, and that happens. You would call that a performance. Like, oh, they're performing at this place. Otherwise, the musical and theater have no affiliation with each other.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you can think of, in this case, like the performance is the contract of people performing at that theater. So like, I think there's some examples here, but there's the Hippodrome Theater. I don't know many theaters. There's Paramount, like in Seattle, like they exist in and of themselves. And musical, there's like Hamilton, Wicked, all of the Hairspray. They exist in and of itself, but until that performance happens at that theater, that's what's happening here. We're saying on this date, there's a performance happening, and that's what's associating the two together. All right.
That's like a subtle distinction between performance and musical, because in my mind, I want to put them as the same thing.
Mhm.
But for coding purposes, the idea of a musical is the idea of it, maybe the notes and the paper, but the performance is the whole complete package of it being
Yep.
performed.
Yeah, and that's the important thing to pay attention to is we might have a different understanding than what the README is asking for. And at the end of the day, this is also to kind of get you into the habit of listening to the client, listening to the deliverables, the company you're going to be working with. As a junior dev, you're not going to have much freedom of choice in the beginning to create deliverables and basically like do whatever you want. You can't really do that. So if your lead is like, I want you to build this that does this, you're going to start out with that and then go from there. So this is also to kind of get you into the habit of reading through what the deliverable is asking for and also asking questions. So if you get through this and you're like, this part is still a little hazy, I don't understand this deliverable, call one of us in and we can kind of guide you. We won't always be able to like give you the answer, but especially on the code challenge, we'll be a little bit more strict. However, it's always better to just ask. And the worst we can say is, hey, I can't give you the answer, but take a look at this. Like we'll at least be able to guide you in the right direction. All right, so we figured out our performance, our join, and our musical and theater. So that's the first step. Always know what the join class is and what the relationships are before you even start to code. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna open up my repository. Oh, let me clear this out. Clear all my drawings. Let me go back to mouse. And I will move this to the bottom. So in my repository, and this is going to be pretty similar to the code challenge too, you're going to have your README. And I know reading through or going through this, if you're not able to render it, can be super confusing. You can just view it in your GitHub repository. That's totally fine. You can render it if it makes it a little bit easier. If you're fine with the markdown, raw markdown file, that's also fine. The main thing I want to point out is there's no RSpec file. So you can't run learn, can't run RSpec. There will also be kind of like a reminder of that here where it says this has no tests in it. You have to create your own sample instances and make sure that your code works. Make sure your code works before you submit it in. Don't turn in broken code. But the main thing here, yeah.
So we're really only using binding.pry.
Yes, exactly. It's a good question. Yep, binding.pry is going to be your main way of debugging, binding.pry and creating instances, which we'll kind of go through here too. Sweet. So the base template of our folders, we have our gem file. So you're going to have a gem file. As with all gem files, make sure you bundle install your code. And it's very likely to happen based on version errors from our past or version mismatches from our past code challenges. Delete the gemlock file if you run into any version stuff and rebundle. And if you have issues with that, call us in, we'll help you out. So the gem file is already going to be set up. All of our gems will be there. You're going to have the environment file already set up that will require all of the gems for the project, and requiring all of the classes in here. And you're going to have potentially all of your models set up, but pay attention to what's there. So I have a class musical, class performance, class theater. It's completely empty for now. And inside of your tools folder, you're going to have a console.rb. And this is where you're going to create your instances inside of console. This line here is going to take in everything from the environment file, our gems, and all of our classes. It's going to include it in the first line. So you have access to all of those classes inside of your Ruby file. And here you can create instances like musical.new, which we'll do, and like performance.new, theater.new, because you have all of that set up from the environment folder.
How does this work with the timer?
The timer?
Yeah, you said like we have 90 minutes. So then it's like once we clone it, then what happens after 90 minutes? Like do we have to submit it before 90 minutes, or is it like it like closes the file?
It will not close the file. It'll just be you pushing up that code. So
Okay.
After 90 minutes, we'll be like, hey, code challenge is done. Push up your code, and you'll push up your code. However, if you're done, if you finish early, you can turn it in anytime you want. So we
That's
have
through like
students.
git commit, right?
Yep. Yeah, and we'll post
How do we
all of.
push the code?
Yeah, we'll post all of the steps tomorrow too. You'll push up your code and you'll submit a pull request, and that's how we get access to your code. Yeah.
And you'll guide us how to do it tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll show you like step by step how the process is going to be. It's going to be very similar to what you do in labs, except instead of saying learn submit, you're going to say git push.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll
So are we
walk
going to be?
through those steps.
Okay, cool.
Did I hear another question?
I think Alec tried to say
I
something.
was just saying, so we're going to be forking and cloning the code challenge repository, or just cloning it?
Just cloning
Okay,
it.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yep. We'll have like we usually do like an intro before the code challenge, so we'll kind of walk you through like the process, and then we'll release the challenge for you all, and then you'll work on it. Yeah. Cool. So I did put a 20-minute timer so that we can take like a quick stretch and break. I'll pause here. We kind of took a look at our code repository. We have an idea of what our relationship and join is. Let's meet back at like 11:01. Stand up and stretch, walk around. I'll leave this code up here so you can take a look, and see you in a bit.
Wait, what?
Where do I get this? Like the
Yeah.
document.
So in here, let me do.
Oh, gotcha.
So I'm gonna post this link in the Zoom chat.
Okay.
So if you can find chat. And if you copy this link and type in git clone and then paste this link, oops, it will clone it into your repository. So it'll make a folder called SESFO 07131120, and then you can CD into that, and it should be the 06 theater review folder. And you can CD into that and open it up in Visual Studio Code. Yeah, let me move this. Let me know if you have trouble accessing it. Can walk through steps. Sweet. I think I resumed recording. Hopefully you got a chance to like just get up away from the computer for a little bit. Let's pick up where we left off. So far, we have taken a look at what the relationships are. Performance is our join. It is going to represent the relationship between a musical and a theater and associate the two. In the beginning, we kind of have our basic class methods and properties section, so we can kind of use this as a guide to set up our initial class. And we'll kind of use that to set up some stuff, and then we'll start creating some instances. You might have noticed like already inside of our console.rb, I did this like musical.new, performance.new, theater.new. Because these classes are already here, I should at least be able to have access to them and see if these instances are created. So let me go to my console. I'm in here. What I want to point out is you're probably used to having like the console in the root repository. In this specific one, it's inside of tools, so pay attention to where you are. And you can say like Ruby tools console.rb. And this will go into my console file, and it'll load up all of my classes, everything in the environment, and it'll also create those musical instances. So right off the bat, I was able to reach my cry at the end, and it didn't bug out or it didn't throw me any errors for musical, performance, or theater. So this gives me an indication that I at least have access to this. So test often, fail often during the code challenge. Do not ever just write code and at the end, go and test. For sure, just because of the time constraint and everything, you will make a typo somewhere. It's bound to happen. And rather than trying to debug at the end, it's way more like stress-free, or there's going to be less stress involved if you just test it right away and know it works. So now I don't have to worry about access issues or anything like that. Cool. So test often. That's my lesson there.
Question.
Yeah.
So in environment.rb, where it says require all dot. So is that dot represent the config directory, or is that the root directory?
This is technically the root directory.
Okay.
It's a little bit weird for this specific folder because my VS Code permissions is gonna be a little bit different. That's why. So your require all will be relative to what your project folder is. And if you run into any issues like with configuration stuff, just call us in and we'll be able to help you kind of debug that. So this will vary a little bit because require all is very relative. But yeah, so this is technically including everything in my folder.
Great. So require all starts at the root directory instead of wherever the file is located. Oh, got it, because it's a require. I get it. It's not a require. It's not a require all. I get it. Okay, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I want to say it doesn't always start at the root directory. You have to pay attention to what your require all is doing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
So if I'm trying to run it now and I get an error.
What's the error that you're getting?
Could not find require all in any, and then the number in any of the sources. Bundler gem not found.
You can do a bundle install, I think, and then it might
Again?
Yeah, that's what I did, and then I got that to work.
I'm also having an error where it says that there's no such file or directory when I try to run it.
For require all or?
Great.
Oh no, for the console.rb.
Yeah, when you do Ruby console.rb, you want to make sure that you're in the tools folder. Because
you can do Ruby tools/console.rb, and then that should run as well.
Yeah.
That is what I did, and it doesn't work.
Let's see. Are you inside of your 06 theater review folder?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Yeah, that's weird. You might have to debug later and see why it's failing. I would try and yeah, because my only initial thought is it should be run from the tools folder. But other than that, I can't say off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take a look and see if it's your config stuff that might be causing it to not find it. Yeah, if you're running into like issues that allows you to not like completely code along, then follow along like in the recording, and then I'll have you all get a chance to like navigate, and you can walk me through code, and you can get practice in that way too. Sweet. And then if you do run into any issues, let me know in Slack today so we can handle those issues before tomorrow, and you're not running into this during the code challenge too. Yeah, so we'll sync in after. Sweet. Any other questions? All right, so let's go ahead and get our musical class set up. In the beginning, it's totally fine if you want to set up kind of like the basic class methods and properties first, and we'll work our way through this and start from here and build out our code. So I'll ask for, I know a couple of you already went, so if you've already went, I'll give like someone else a chance to kind of navigate me through code. Some of these will be easier than the other ones, so that's totally fine. We'll just keep on popcorning until we get through this as much as we can. Who wants to be the first volunteer? I will have you set up the, well, I'll have you do like the first 2 deliverables where we're setting up our musical class, and it should initialize with a name and setting city. And the musical should respond to the musical name and musical setting city methods.
I'll go.
Thank you. All right.
All right, so on line 2, we're going to do def space new.
New.
And then end that on the new line down. Yep.
Okay.
Do you want me to tell you to end stuff like that, or is that just implied that you would know to do that?
Sure. I could add the ending. That's fine. So you can treat it like how you would navigate through a pair programming code, where you explain the code, your thought process, and I can code it out.
Okay. And then we're going to give it an argument of name on line 2, and then comma, and then another argument of setting underscore city.
Cool.
And then for the time being, let's add an attr accessor on line 2.
Okay.
And the attr accessor of both name and setting city. We might change these or to get rid of one or the other, but for now, just as a placeholder.
Okay. And then what else?
Do we want to do the sketch out the method of name and setting city? Oh, I should respond to, and that's telling me that those are probably an attr accessor.
Yes. We should. So if we want to still work with the initialize, it should initialize with the name and setting city. We have our new. Oops. Our new takes in a name and setting city. How can I actually assign those instances?
Yep. And so on line 4, do @new gets new.
New?
Oh, sorry, I lied. @name gets name. And then, yep, @setting city gets setting city.
Cool.
So why did we not use initialize there? Is new a different way of doing it?
That's a good question. This should be initialized. .new is our method that calls the initialize. So inside of the class itself, in our template, this is initialize.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Sweet. The main thing I want to point out here is this deliverable that says musical should respond to musical name and setting city. Brad, you did a good job. This is setting, I mean, we'll change this a little bit, but at least as a starting point, we have an attr accessor. I do recommend starting out with an attr reader first, and then adding an attr accessor after, so the user doesn't have update abilities right away. However, this indicates that there's some kind of reader writer associated with it. It doesn't typically mean that we're creating a separate method. Our macros for our readers and writers takes care of that. All right, Brad, and I'll have you popcorn off to the next person for these two deliverables.
All right, Noah.
Oh, what? Okay. What
got
the
this.
next two should be?
So we're doing a musical.
Okay. So let's change the setting city in the attribute accessor to attribute reader.
Cool. Reader. Wow.
Reader.
Sweet.
And next one is musical should have a method called all returns all the instance. So we need to create at all. For we go to empty array.
Awesome.
In line 9 or after the city, yeah. So we added all shovel to self. And let's create the method for this. So def self.all. And in the new line, edit all. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me put my timer for 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you. And I will have, and you can popcorn off to the next person. I'll have them work on this method here. And you all can like take 30 seconds to kind of read through this. Musical should have a method musical dot all introductions, and it's going to print out this thing. And I'll copy this over here for now. All right, Noah, who do you want to popcorn to?
I'll popcorn to Lucas.
Sweet.
Okay, all right, so you're gonna make a new method called all introductions.
All introductions.
Right. And then it's gonna put out a message. So just do the quotes. Welcome. This is. Yeah.
All right.
And then
Puts.
and then where before insert musical name here, you're gonna do the hashtag before that to make it what is that called again? When it's like a placeholder.
This interpolates it. So string interpolation.
Yeah, interpolation. And then right there, you're gonna put. Would you do? I mean, it doesn't take in the names, but the name would have to go there. So would it be just self because you're passing in the instance?
So self dot
name.
Name. All right.
And then
put a binding method.
And then the other one would just be the setting city or self dot setting city.
Cool.
Something like that. I don't know if that's gonna work exactly, but
that's good. Got a good starting point. So we can, at this point, this is where we're starting to kind of use some variables and kind of like have some output, and we also have external things that we're doing outside of our basic method. So this is a great opportunity to put a binding.pry or make sure that you can create these instances and have these go through. So to kind of test this out, make sure when you're creating your instances, it's going to go in console.rb because this is the location I have access to all 3 classes. So I'll comment these 2 out for now because we're not really doing anything with these. So let's create some musicals and make sure that our musical goes through. So in my musical class right now, I just have a setting, city, and name that I've determined, and I have my add it all. And after this is set up, we can kind of debug our all introductions. And I'll comment this out for now so we can test out our musical instances. So anyone have examples of musicals that we can create?
Greece.
Hamilton.
All right, let's do it. Greece. Greece? No.
Yes, I think it's an answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone know the setting city of Greece? Can I put high school? Is it a high school? Sure. Maybe college. And then Hamilton. Where is Hamilton set?
Washington, D.C.? No, Philadelphia, probably, or Boston?
Washington, D.C.?
Sure. I should know these.
Oh, wait, like setting city. I should probably know these too. But
Hamilton, New York, or Philly, yeah.
okay, I'll put New York. Cool. I put high school for this, but it's fine. All right, so we got some musicals. Let's go ahead and see if it goes through. So just like a couple instances here, which is fine. Again, we made it to our end in our binding.pry, which is good news because that means our musical.new works. At least it didn't bug out there. Super important, also test musical.all. And we have our instances of a musical we've created, which is awesome. So my important thing I want to point out here is going back and forth between pry and writing code inside of our console and testing things out. So now if I have a couple musicals that I can use to kind of test my all introductions. And one thing I did want to point out here is you want to pay attention to what kind of method you're building out. So in here, so far what we've done is we've used the hashtag. These were instance methods from our adder, reader, adder, accessor. Music.all was a class method because we said musical.all. So we have self.all here. And what kind of method is all introductions?
Class method?
Yeah, it's a class method. So in this case, this is going to be done at the class level. So that kind of gives us an idea of what we're going to do inside of here, because we won't have access to the same variables inside of our class as we would inside of our instances. So let's go ahead and I'm going to exit out of this. And I'm gonna do Ruby tools console.rb again. And let's do musical.all introductions. If you want to double check if the method's available, hit that tab so you can kind of do a double check with yourself to make sure that you have access to that method. So I'm in my pry, and I can actually just copy this and paste it in here and see if it works. So I'm going to clear this out and I'm going to paste it. And you see the error right away inside of your pry. I would say this is probably the most helpful place to see an error because you can debug it right then and there. You can say, all right, what do I have available to me within this class? What do I have access to? And how am I going to get setting city? Because we do want to be able to interpolate the setting city inside of here. Let me move this to the side and I'll take this out. So we do want to be able to say the name of the play or the musical and the setting city. However, at the class level, if I type in self, self is now musical. So how am I going to get access to self.name? What's the one variable that's available to me from the class level?
Add at all?
Yeah, the add at all. And you can say like self.all, you can say musical.all, whichever you feel most comfortable with, you can say add at all. However, you're going to talk to the .all method to get access to all of the musical, and always be paying attention to the data types that you're using inside of your project. Add at all is an array. So you need to go into the array and pick out the name and setting city and display that onto the screen. I'll pause for questions.
So since we shoveled self into add it all in the initialize method, that's why we're returning the full array right here with the name and the setting city.
Exactly. Yep. Without this line here, this array will forever be empty. So that's why this is super important. And this line gives you access to all of the musicals, all of the theater, all of the performance ever created.
So then when we go down into line 20, and we do self.name, how come we can't just put name?
Because self is musical here.
Okay.
So if it's an instance method, you can say self.name because self will be either this or this.
I see. Okay.
But from the class level, I only have access to this whole thing. And if I want to get to each individual name and setting city, I have to go into this array. And anytime you see an array, this is where enumerables come in. So you can pick any and all enumerables you want. In this case, we're just trying to print stuff out to the screen. So this is one of those cases where each is probably perfect to use. So you can say like self.all.each, and I'll write out the block. And inside of here, we have a musical instance. So I'm going to type in musical. And this is where I can literally copy paste this because now it'll work. I have access to, instead of self.name, it'll be musical and musical.setting city. So I have to get into the array first and then print out the stuff. So this extra layer needs to come in because I'm at the class level.
Why does it get lowercase versus uppercase? That's been a little bit confusing for me.
This thing?
For musical under the self.all introductions. If you go back to the code.
Oh
wait, you had self. Where did you have musical.name? We were just writing that somewhere. Yeah, right below your mouse.
Oh, here. Yes. Yeah. This needs to be lowercase musical because I'm talking about the musical instance within this loop. I'm not talking about the class musical. Gotcha. Or musical placeholder would be more instance placeholder for this each block. I think I heard another question.
Oh yeah, I had a question. In the binding pry, how did you go into musical? Because or how'd you go from pry main to pry musical? It was like accessing the class, right?
Yeah, I called the method. So I launched console.rb. I don't know why I cleared my screen. I launched console.rb and I was at the end of my, so let me exit out of here. So now I'm in my main. So now I'm in console.rb, and I called musical.allintroductions.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And then I went into my pry.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I just cleared out my loop that I wrote, but I'll rewrite it. So we'll do self.all.each, and I'll just do like, I always do the longhand version, so it's more like clear. And here, because we're talking about every single musical instance, we replace that. Cool. So in this case, you really have to pay attention to what kind of method you're in, because that kind of gives you a guidance on what variables you have access to. Any other questions on this? And then I'll run this again so we can kind of verify that it works. All right, so let's do musical.all introductions. And we don't have to worry about this for now because we're not doing anything with it. But the main part is this string right here, puts it to the screen. All right, now I'm gonna put 5 minutes on the clock. Take a look at the README. I'll pull it up here and write out theater. And if you get done with theater, feel free to jump to performance. And we'll code out, is this not working? Oh. So theater should initialize with the title and city. Theater should have a method theater.all that returns all the instances of theater. And then if you get done with that, start working on the performance join. And you can definitely use the musical as a guide. And even if you're not able to run the code for now, if you want practice just coding up the class, feel free to type it in VS Code, and you can kind of verify at least the code. And I'm gonna cool. 3 minutes. I'll pause, share real quick, and then I'll code it out with you. And then you could do like a cross-reference. I always see like the chat messages too late. give it about a minute more. Right. Oh, I forgot to share my screen. Reshare. Start wrapping up your classes. This should be what your theater class looks like, at least from these two deliverables here. We initialized with a title and city, and theater has the added all variable, which is going to be our class variable, and then a method which returns all the instances of a theater, which is going to be this one here. So very similar to musical. If you end up kind of like copy pasting it over, I don't think it's the end of the world. Try writing it out all the way. Just make sure that you fix like all the attributes so that you don't run into any bugs there. Cool. Any questions on setting up the theater class base template? And then just like we did for our musical, let's go ahead and create our theater instances too. I only know Paramount, which is in Seattle. I think we need one in New York, so we can do
Radio
some
City Musical.
What was that?
Radio City Musical.
Ooh, okay. Nice. Wait, is that a musical or a theater?
That's a theater.
Oh, cool. All right. Any other theaters people want to add?
Palace Theater, Canton, Ohio. That's where I used to perform.
Oh, that's cool. And then I'm never sure if it's ER or RE.
Depends on if you're English or American.
I'll try to be consistent. Cool. So got some theaters, and let's go and check if it works. It's always going back and forth between Pry and our console, making sure that it reaches the end. So it didn't hit any bugs, which is awesome. And now I should be able to say theater.all, and I have instances of all of my theater, which is exactly what I want. So we got some instances of a musical, we got some instances of a theater. We have kind of like our basis set up for starting in the association and aggregations method. Typically, if you do end up starting from the second portion here, then you'll have to set up all of this stuff anyways. So you can pick and choose like what the order is. But if you have some of the instances set up for musical and theater, it'll make performance and creating a performance much easier since you have data that you can work with. So the main part here is performance should initialize with a date, a musical, and theater. And since we know it's the join, this is going to be musical and theater objects. That's why it's super important to create these objects first. And I haven't even stored them in a variable yet, so I can store them in a variable. This is going to be Greece, Hamilton, and I'll say Paramount. I'm going to say Radio City Musical.
It's Music Hall. H-A.
H-A?
Yeah, so get rid of music and then another word, hall.
Oh, music hall. I'm sorry. Cool.
Where the Rockettes perform.
All right. And then I'll do PT for pause theater, just to put some abbreviations. That's just me like being deaf. Cool. So we got some theaters, and putting this in a variable allows me to access those instances later. So when I create a performance, I can pass in musical and theater and test my associations. Are there any volunteers who want to lead me through the performance setup? I'll have you do the first two deliverables here. Someone new?
I'll do it. I'll try to do
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, you got this.
So performance should initialize with the date, string, and musical and
Nice.
theater. So def initialize date,
Musical
and theater.
theater. Cool. Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
So at date equals date. Same thing as musical and theater.
Yeah.
But it says should initialize with the date and then string. So do we have to do, I don't think we have to do anything in the initialize method for that.
Ruby will automatically take in whatever argument we given and assign it to that instance variable. So if you pass in a string, it'll assign a string.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And what would the second deliverable look like? Performance should have methods musical, theater, and return a musical instance and a theater instance associated to the performance.
So def musical.
Musical.
I return musical instance and theater instance associated to the performance. So could you just do just at musical?
It'll be at musical since it's an instance variable. So it'll be at musical, which is going to be this musical instance. And the same thing for theater. It'll be def theater.
So we're just creating a getter for all three of those, right?
Yep, exactly. And what's our shortcut for creating the getters in our class?
So we're going to do adder reader.
Awesome. And adder reader, and then we can put in musical and theater. And I don't think it really tells us if there's no access set for it, so we can also just make this adder accessor if we want. We'll make it reader for now and see if it kind of like, if we ever need to change it.
And then we can get rid of those down there.
Yep. Yeah, this is a little tricky because it says it should have methods, but really it's the adder reader or adder accessor. And make sure that you remove this if you're using this, because this will overwrite it, which could cause, like, it could break your code potentially. But yeah, thank you. And then who wants to lead us through performance.all? It's the final bit before we start musical and theater. Just like cheer you on. You got this.
I'll do it.
Thank you. All right, we're just gonna add the third deliverable, which is performance should have a performance.all, and a method which returns performance.
You're gonna do at all at the top and create an empty array.
Awesome.
And then push self into all and then initialize. And then create a method below that says self.all. And then return at all.
Sweet. Cool. So we got some performances set up. Thank you. And we have our add all for performance. When you're working with the join class, having this inside of the join and having this self.all is super important. Just because without these variables being set up, our musical can't access theater and our theater can't access musical. So you want to make sure this goes through and you can associate and access those variables too. So in this case, we can, to associate the musical and theater with a performance, we can say performance.new, and I'll just do one because we're going to build a method for it. And it's going to, let's say like Greece is going to perform at Paramount. And I'll just put like a random string in December if we get out of quarantine. It will be in December. So we have our string date. And this is the musical and this is the Paramount. The most important part when you're associating these two instances together is that you're passing in that whole object. rather than a string or something like that.
And this is where, when you're calling on the variables for each thing, that if you haven't defined them, this performance on you is not going to work.
Yep, exactly.
Right. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. When you have a join or you have that belongs to a relationship, the objects need to exist before. That is correct. All right. And then let's do performance.all. So this is what you want if your join association is successful. It's kind of weird, the formatting here, but you have an array, which is performance.all. And performance, we have our performance object. It ends like all the way down here. And we have our date. And our musical instance has our whole musical object. And our theater instance has our whole theater object. And because it's an object of theater, it also has its own properties and methods associated with it. So double check your association and double check that you can have call the addable from that.
What is the like the reverse shovel next to the Paramount thing there? In the title?
Ooh. Title?
Yeah,
Yes.
title. It's like Paramount and then.
Oh, this thing? Yeah, so this is the end of the performance object. So the performance object starts here and ends here. And this is for the theater object. So that since the theater is nested inside of performance, that's why you see the 2 caret signs here. Yeah. So that's why if you want to like verify which object is nested inside of what, you can like trace the angle brackets and see where it ends. That's a good question. All right, let me render this again because I lost it. Cool. So that was just setting up the musical theater and performance so that we can get some of the association stuff methods working. I'm going to come back to this, so I'll leave that up to if you want to build it out. Let's take a look at these 2 deliverables here in our musical class. So this is where we're actually going to have the musical class talk to the theater class, and we're saying, musical, I want to be able to perform in a theater. So the musical is kind of creating that performance or creating that method. It's going to be an instance method, and it's going to take in a theater object and date as arguments and associate the musical and theater. And the keyword that I want you to pay attention to for this specific deliverable is associates. And when we associate something, what does that mean? Jump to my thing. So be thinking about that, and you can start kind of like coding it up. Is there anyone who wants to navigate me through working through this, perform in theater, and build it out? It's going to be in the musical class. Exit out of this.
I can.
Thank you. All right, let's do it. So we are building out.
So the deliverable says musical perform in theater takes a theater object and a date string arguments and associates the musical to that theater.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with perform in theater and takes an object. Now this would be a, this is actually an instance method, correct? And not a class method?
Yep, it is going to be an instance method. And even if it's not from the deliverable, let me make this a little smaller. You can see kind of like the hashtag here, which would indicate that this is an instance method.
Okay, awesome. So def perform in theater.
Def perform in theater. All right.
And then let's have the arguments be theater and date. And then the return value is going to be performance, the class performance.
Performance.
Dot new.
Dot new.
And then it should feed in the date as the first instance or as the first argument. And then in the performance class, Can just see the initialize on the, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then it'll be, so in dot perform in theater, or in def perform in theater, it'll be, it'll feed in date, self, and theater.
Cool. Thank
So then
you.
we'll create a performance with the theater object, the date string and itself.
Awesome. And yeah, so this, we can like test this out real quick and make sure it goes through. The keywords that kind of gave us an indication that performance.new is this associates. And similar to, if you remember from like the hikes, add hike method, whenever you're creating the association or the join or the other class, typically you're going to take in the extra variables that you need as parameters inside of that method. So if we're talking about associating a musical and a theater, when you're creating that join, it takes in a date, a musical, and theater object. And inside of musical, we have access to the instance itself through the self keyword. And we're getting a theater and a date. And if you are looking at the reasoning behind what variables am I taking in this method, this will also kind of give you a hint on what association we're creating. And similar to what we said before, if I am a musical, me performing in the theater is me creating all of the performances that I'm going to do. So I'm going to take in a theater instance and associate the two. Any questions on what we did here? All right, and this is where it kind of goes back to the two different ways you can create the association. Before we said performance.new from our console.rb, you also want to make sure that your performance from the musical instance works. So if we wanted to test that out, we have some random musical here, so I can say Hamilton this time. Because it's a musical instance method, I have to call this on a musical instance. And that's perform in theater. So I'm going to say I want to perform in some theater, and I'm going to pass in the variables that I need. And in this case, let me say this is also like in December, all feature projections. And we'll say Hamilton is also going to perform in Paramount. And we'll say Greece is also going to perform in Radio City Music Hall. Cool. So on top of testing to make sure that your association works, your join works, test those methods too. And when you're calling those methods from the console.rb, pay attention to what type of method it is and which instance it belongs to. So still going back and forth and double checking that it works. Reach the end. And now if I type in, this might be a lot of text that'll show up on the screen. But if I type in performance.all, it's a little bit harder to see here, but there's my first performance that I created. There's my second performance that I created. And this is my third performance that I created. So I can actually trace through each performance and which theater and musical I was associated to. All right. And let's go ahead and I notice we are getting to 11:50. And I still want to kind of see and implement, like I want to get the performance theater and performances musicals in here and still implement this out. I also want to give you a chance to get some food. We have our study hall scheduled for, like we have some study time that's happening during lab work time here. So I might give you a chance to code this up on your own, and then I'll do a review for, yeah, this is on the personal calendar right now, but during your study time, see if you can code up the performances in theater, the last 4 methods, or at least get through like one of them and have a template of what to do. You can even just like pseudocode it out. And then I'll do a review in the main session before our pair lab is released. So let me add, finish up code challenge review. Cool. And then we'll build up, like I can answer any questions that you have off of that. Sweet. Because I also want to give you space to ask questions on what we've done so far. So the main part is whichever method you're working on, make sure that you're testing it out. All of your instances are going to be created in your console.rb. And each method that you create, just add an instance for it or do it inside of your pry and make sure it goes through and it works. And
sorry.
And when you're setting up those methods inside of the class itself, pay attention to the variables that are coming in that we're asking for in the deliverable, and just write a template out first. What variables am I taking in? What classes do I need to talk to in order to figure out what piece of code it is? And just debug step by step as you go. I'll pause for any questions. All right. Cool.
Just a quick update to the code that we just did. I think we should switch the order of theater and date arguments, because like even in the console.rb, because in the convention everywhere else is date first. So in depth performance theater, I think switch it.
Oh, did I mess up the order?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not.
It was in the previous page. Yeah, the date theater.
Yeah, it was like even in performance.new, date is first. So I think we should just switch it so it makes more. Yeah, perfect. Cool.
I did performance at all and didn't look at it. That's my fault. Thank you. Yeah, order matters when you're working with the instances. Thank you. All right, yeah, and I'll push up this code. Good push. All right, and if you had issues with your console, or if you had issues with your files, let's take a look after lunch. So feel free to shoot me a Slack and I'll start kind of just syncing in with you like in the main session, because I want to make sure it's handled before the code challenge tomorrow. So if we figure it out now, we'll be able to kind of get you set up for tomorrow. So if you weren't able to like access it, or you had some binding.pry issue or anything at all, don't hesitate to Slack out and we'll debug it together. Cool. Sweet. Thank you all for doing this code along with me. Finish up as much of the methods as you can. Do some review after lunch, and then we'll finish up this review later today before pair labs are released. Any final questions?
Yeah, so real quick, how would you test the musical.rb, or would you just do the console.rb and run the test?
I would just do the console.rb and run the tests. So in here, when we wanted to make sure that the musical went through, we said grease equals musical.new and passed in that string. So that's me verifying that I'm able to initialize a musical instance and create it. So that's kind of what gives me the validation that this code works. What you'll notice is if you try to test it inside of here, like you can put require pry and put a binding.pry at the end and it'll still technically work. However, musical doesn't have access to theater from here because they're in 2 separate classes.
Gotcha.
The only place that you have access to everything is in console.rb, and that's because we put the environment at the top. So this is going to be the most efficient and fastest way to have access to all of your classes and just create instances in here.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So then in our actual console, what would we type to test console.rb?
That would be, so we're in ls, and right now we're in our main directory, which is tools, and my console is inside of the tools folder. So anytime I want to run a Ruby file, I'm going to say Ruby, and I have to give it the path of where my console is. So I have to say console tools console.rb. And when I hit enter, this loads up the whole console file, and it hits the pry at the bottom of the file. So it went through this, it went through all of this, and we're at the pry at the bottom. So if I type in like Greece, I have access to Greece. So this is what tells me that it worked, because the musical instance is there. And if I say musical.all, I see all of my musicals. And if I say theater.all, I got all of my theaters. This one's like slightly in the middle. And then I can also say performance.all.
Okay.
Yep. So
Yeah,
this
I
is
got
me
a
kind of.
load error, so I'll figure it out later.
Ooh. Yeah. Send me a
sense.
Slack message and we can debug it.
Okay.
Yeah, we might have to modify your like VS Code settings, or your gems. Could be one of your gems need to be installed. All right. Any other questions?
Daria.
Yeah. Oh, what?
Want to talk to her?
Hi, that's crazy.
She's my cousin.
Wow, small world. I'll sync in with her later. Hi.
Okay.
I'll Slack her. That's amazing.
She said she'll Slack you.
Okay, Slack me. Good to see you. Oh, that's so cool. All right. Sweet. Thank you all for this review. Let me conclude this recording.